I remember that story a couple of months ago, or even less than that. The story a couple of weeks ago, where we had this report of a hate crime at the University of Utah. Well, we're going to be talking with somebody who's done a lot of digging into this, and it's pretty amazing. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was around the 1st of January of this year. Remember the story about this report that there was some hate crimes up at the University of Utah? The media gave it a lot of coverage in this town. This where students alleged that the KKK was on the University of Utah campus recruiting people, that one student, in fact, had feces smeared on her door, and then police investigated, and the story kind of died away, right? Well, now, some people have tried to dig into it more and have come up with some rather interesting conclusions. Joining us on our Newsmaker line to talk about that is Matt Lamb. Matt is the editor of the College Fix. Matt, how are you? Welcome to the Rod Arquette Show. Thanks for joining us tonight. What did you find out, Matt, about these so-called hate crimes up at the University of Utah?
Right. So the student took two incidents and put them into one. What's interesting is the university, when they made their announcement, said, oh, these are two separate incidents. But University of Utah had already determined that one of them, there was no evidence for it, that there was not KKK members recruiting on campus.
What exactly was going on here? I mean, who's behind all of this?
Right. So there's a student, her name's Hannah Sandiwi or Miss Sasaka. She goes like a couple different names on Instagram and then quoted, but she's a leader in some sort of black activist group on campus. And she was trying to call attention, it looks like, to broader racial concerns. This is actually in the emails and reports in our article. And it looks like she may have actually improperly found this out, whether a staff member told her about these different incidents or what. The other thing to note is that the first student who had excrement or some substance smeared on her door was totally fine with the resolution. They basically moved her to a different dorm. And all that happened is the police just went back to the same people, asked them the same questions, reviewed the same video footage, which obviously there wasn't going to be, the Klan wasn't suddenly going to reappear in video. And so it was just a waste of time. But the university, as of at least a few days ago, said this was still under review.
Why? The question is, why is it still under review if they haven't found anything as of yet? I mean, it's a couple of weeks old now, if not nearly a month old.
It's actually, the first incident was September, so it's actually, 4 or 5 months old?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the exact problem. There's no witnesses, there's no video, and we, of course, asked the university, do you have new leads? Do you have new evidence? Like, what has changed? I mean, what changed from a couple months ago? And they just said, oh, here, read our statements about this matter. Of course, the other thing that you always see is, we're committed to fighting the Klan and white supremacy. Okay, that's great. Yes, Klan and white supremacy, those are bad, but what does that have to do with meaningless investigations that you're just looking at? I mean, you could look at video footage for hours and hours. Nothing's going to suddenly appear if you just keep watching it enough.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Matt, on this. So this student alleges that someone smeared poop on a door and that the KKK was up at the University of Utah actively recruiting people. And the more we look into this, the more we're starting to find out there may be nothing to either one or both of the stories. Have I got that right?
And even further, she took those two stories and put into one to say that the Klan was going around smearing excrement on a black girl's door. I guess as part of the recruitment was her story. I'm not really sure. But yeah, that was her concern, that white hooded Klansmen were walking around and no one else noticed. The only quote unquote witness to this was one resident assistant who heard some other kids talking about it, that they had seen the Klan on campus.
How much work has the university put into trying to get to the bottom of this, Matt? Do you know?
Well, I mean, I know that they've sent detectives and police officers to rewatch the footage, to interview people, to try to call people. So I would imagine that's hours. And, who knows how much other time they've spent figuring out the media response to it. And, again, it's just a wild goose chase. There's no witnesses. So they could spend an infinite amount of time not finding the non-existent Klansmen. I don't know if that's too many double negatives.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, is this an example again, Matt, of a story surfaces? There's an overreaction to it, and there was a lot of coverage on this here in Salt Lake when it first happened, Matt, when in fact, when you get to the bottom of it, there's really nothing at all, or it was a hoax. I mean, is this just another example of what's going on around the country at times?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another example of a student activist, this girl, Hannah, taking a couple incidents, one of which happened that this girl's door was attacked. It's not really clear who did it. Could have just been another girl, didn't like her. I don't know. And then another incident that was closed, the KKK one, and using this for a broader, of course, there was rallies and, activist demands, and this always goes into, the bigger picture. So even if they never find anyone, I bet you the administrators will say, well, this still talks to a bigger issue about racism on campus. Does it? If there's no proof, there's no evidence of racism, but does it really, talk to a bigger issue?